but I don't think people quite understand what buying this phone means in terms of the amount of information that some of these big tech companies are collecting on you. If you were to buy this phone here in Tallahassee, throw it on the front seat, the passenger seat of your car, and drive to Dallas, Texas, and never use it. Don't use it for directions, don't make any phone calls, don't search the web for anything. They are still grabbing information every single minute. They know if you've stopped at a gas station. They know if you've stopped to grab a burger. They know if you've stopped in certain cities or towns. And this really raises huge questions about Floridians' data privacy and what the relationship is between a consumer who's purchasing some of these services or using some of these services and big tech's ability to monetize our privacy. I want to thank Speaker Chris Spowles for joining me here today to announce this new proposal, which puts additional meat on the bones from what we announced a couple weeks ago. We also have Representative McFarland, who's going to be carrying this bill in the House, and so I want to welcome her to Tallahassee and thank her for being involved in this. We did talk about that we would be pursuing legislation regarding big tech. We did talk about the data privacy, but we were going to have more information on that, and that's today. Of course, we talked about the censorship, the deplatforming, and the election interference. In that measure that we talked about the other day, will go a long way to strengthening safeguards in Florida against actions taken by big tech companies to censor users and interfere in our elections. Today is another important step, again, putting more meat on the bones to check the growing power and influence of big tech and to safeguard the privacy and security of consumer data. The big tech platforms have created a surveillance economy which enriches those platforms by free riding on consumer data. The sale and scope of consumer information that is collected, analyzed, and auctioned on a second-by-second basis is escalating daily. Floridians who use technology almost invariably entrust personal, financial, and even biometric information to large, wealthy corporations. Worse, the big tech platforms have made privacy an illusion. The truth is, Floridians' most intimate information is collected, analyzed, and sold to the highest bidder. The exact kind of information we rightly insist law enforcement obtain a warrant in order to get, big tech platforms, they take that as a matter of course. The exact kind of information we would consider to be an absolute property right, the big tech platforms collect and auction regularly. The exact kind of information we hold as deeply personal, from places of worship to the frequency of medical visits, big tech platforms view as an opportunity to sell advertisements. The so-called privacy disclosures provided by these big tech companies are mind-numbingly complex and full of legal and technical jargon impenetrable by most Americans, including this one at the podium. All of you are familiar with those privacy disclosures. They often come in the form of a perfunctory acknowledgement that something has been updated to a nebulous contract that you don't even know you've agreed to when you use the platform. And that's exactly the way big tech companies want it to be. Floridians should not have to give up their most intimate information to use a mobile device, surf the internet, or connect with friends and families on social media. The status quo has all been a one-way street with big tech, where they have all the power, they dictate all the rules, they take whatever data they want, when they want, and consumers get virtually nothing except the, quote, privilege of using their own devices that they've already paid for. But we can't let it go on any longer. So today, we're proud to announce the introduction of a data privacy bill that will finally check the near unfettered ability that these companies have to use our information and, more importantly, ensure the protection of Floridians' personal and private information. So first and foremost, the bill gives Floridians more control of their data. The financial success of these big platforms who are collecting and selling your personal information has been built on their ability to do so without you realizing it, and effectively without your informed consent. Consumers are left in the dark as elaborate schemes, markets, and mechanisms are developed to optimize tech companies' ability to use personal data and information to increase their bottom lines which exceed hundreds of billions of dollars, all on the backs of consumers. So today we look to change what is acceptable in the Sunshine State by shining a light on these practices and by empowering consumers to make decisions about if, how, and where their personal information is used. Under our proposal, companies that want to collect and sell your personal information are going to be required to tell you how they plan to use your personal information in detail. And further, going to make sure that they tell you exactly what they are collecting and recognize that a consumer has a right to decide how their personal information is used. Many of these same companies and online platforms won't give you the ability to, quote, opt out of the collection and sale of your personal information. We will change that by requiring that every Floridian be afforded an option to opt out of that practice without discrimination or retaliation from the company. In Florida, we're going to make sure consumers are in the driver's seat to make that decision, not Silicon Valley or other global companies who are far more focused on their profits than on your privacy. Through our proposal today, we empower both the Attorney General to bring actions against big tech companies for violating these consumer protections, as well as individuals to bring a cause of action against a technology company for failing to adhere to Florida's rules on the protection of your data. Second, the legislation expands the Florida Information Protection Act to include biometric data, such as our fingerprints, voice recordings, retina scans, and more. The Florida Information Protection Act, which protects Floridians' personal information by ensuring that businesses and government entities take reasonable measures to protect their information and report data breaches to affected consumers. By including this type of information under the protections, we heighten the bar of disclosure for breach of that sensitive computer data by a technology company. A few things can be more invasive than a company taking, logging, and selling our own biometric data. The high sensitivity of this information warrants and deserves an equally high bar for protection. So the heads they win, tails Floridians lose relationship with big tech needs to end. We're going to shift the balance of power back to consumers and away from big tech because Floridians are no longer going to be dictated to by those big tech companies. Starting today, we're going to have a more balanced approach where consumers can, in part, control their most sensitive data and reclaim their privacy. This proposal is another positive step toward a bolder, brighter, and safer future for Floridians and for Floridians' data privacy. I want to thank members of the House who've been working on this, not only our initial bill involving the deplatforming and the censorship, but also now with this data privacy component, which is absolutely critical. And quite frankly, as serious as deplatforming and censorship is, every single Floridian who uses any type of technology will be impacted by this bill. So I think it's timely, and I think it's well done, and I look forward to the House passing it and look forward to it going over to the Florida Senate for a positive response there. So Speaker, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Governor, and thank you for your great leadership, not just this week on data privacy, but last week as we tackled some of the issues surrounding big tech, to the Lieutenant Governor, who's been a great champion of these issues, for Representative McFarland, who's a new member of the Florida House and one of our shining stars. Like the Governor, she's a Navy veteran who served her nation and now is here in the Florida House serving the great state of Florida. I also want to thank our partners in the Florida Senate, Senate President Wilton Simpson and the senators who have a great passion for data privacy, a great passion for all things that to keep Floridians' privacy secure, ranging from genetic privacy to hear what we're talking about today. So I thank President Simpson and our friends in the Senate. You know, over the course of human history, there have been great advancements, great inventions that have changed the world forever. They've altered human behavior. Inventions like the printing press, the internal combustion engine, and the telephone. While these inventions have changed the world, our modern technology has changed over such a rapid pace that we as a society are still trying to understand the profound implications that it has for us as a society. But one of those implications is a stunning loss of privacy. Nearly everywhere you go, everywhere you search, every site that you visit, a friend that you make on Facebook, as you travel across the state, your data is tracked and too often it is sold. There was a 60-minute special just about a week ago where it talked about genetic privacy, which we worked on last year in the Florida House and the Florida Senate. that this governor signed to protect genetic privacy, that this threat isn't limited just to the data that you have on the internet, but it ranges to even your most fundamental part of who you are, your DNA. But that doesn't matter to tech companies who sell those to private vendors and often, as is covered in the 60 Minutes, to foreign entities. This bill seeks to bring these things into the daylight. It seeks to change the dynamic that exists between our personal privacy and the powers of big tech and big technology. You know, as we talk to Floridians across the state, it's not that they don't know that these companies have this information. They know. And it's not even that they're worried necessarily about that they have it. They're worried about what are they going to do with it once they have our private information. A 2019 poll found that 3 out of 4 Americans have found to have limited trust in Amazon, Google, or Facebook would handle their data properly. But this distrust is even more far-reaching than social media. People have little trust when it comes to handling their data in general when big corporations have access to it. In a 2014 survey, half of those surveyed believe they had not much or no control over their personal data. Imagine that. Over 21 million Floridians in this state, and the vast majority of them believing that they have no personal control over their data. 90% of people believe that sharing or selling access to a consumer's public information should require their permission. Data on places that we go, things that we buy, things that we search for on the internet are not for the world to see, for people to use to influence your opinion, or for companies to purchase advertisements specifically tailored to you. It's clear that Floridians are frustrated with the lack of control that they have over their personal data that's being collected about them on an almost minute-by-minute basis. And that's why I'm proud to stand with the governor, Lieutenant Governor, Representative McFarland, and work with our partners in the Senate, like Senate President Simpson, to combat that lack of control that Floridians have over their personal information. I have long believed, as has members of the Republican legislature, that sunshine is the best disinfectant. And it's about time we clean up how our personal data is being stored and how it's used. The legislation protects users' biometric data as fingerprints, voice recordings, and retinal scans have become more and more popular over the years. It requires disclosures of what information a business has collected about you and how they will use it or store it. It also allows users to request deletion or correction of personal information and to opt out of the sale of personal information to third parties. How often have you heard a Floridian say that? How do I get that information back? How do I change that information? I can't get anyone on the phone. I can't get anyone to talk to me. It's my personal information and they don't care. Under this bill, they'll have to care. This law covers more than just big tech. It covers businesses with a global gross annual revenue of over 25 million that buys, receives, or sells information on 50,000 or more customers, households, or devices, or derives more than 50% of their global annual revenue from selling consumers' personal information. As the governor mentioned, the Attorney General would have provisions to file civil penalties for each individual act, whether it is unintentional or intentional. This bill offers a common sense solution to something that every Floridian is dealing with every time that they open their phone or engage in the digital space. And our message here to Floridians today is this: the days where you have no control will soon be over.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Governor, as well. Our country is founded on the ideals of freedom and a right to privacy. But another hallmark of our great country, innovation, has created a digital universe where a parallel but shapeless version of ourselves exists. Today, I'm filing a critical piece of legislation in the Florida House to ensure the private data of Floridians stays private. When we interact with websites, with apps, and services online, we leave behind troves of personal information about ourselves. As commonplace activities like checking in with friends, finding a place to eat, or even keeping a calendar have all migrated online, users often have no idea that they are simultaneously giving information to companies about where they've walked, shopped, and prayed. As a consumer, I believe that we have a right to our own personal data. In our society, the amount of power that we have handed over to companies through the use of our data has resulted in an erosion of our right to privacy and an erosion of our ownership over our own identity. While we celebrate the spirit of American ingenuity and innovation, we must balance this with protections for our private information. There ought to be guardrails, standards, and as this bill proposes, a reaffirmation of our rights in the powerful and rapidly growing realm of personal data. Together, under the leadership of Governor DeSantis, Florida will reestablish our right to privacy and to our own personal information. This bill affirms 4 main rights of the individual: the right to find out what information companies have about you, the right to tell them to delete it, the right to tell companies not to sell your data without your express permission, and the right to sue in the event of a data breach. Together, under these gentlemen's leadership, Florida will reestablish our right to privacy and over our own personal information. Our state will once again lead the nation, this time with a strong data privacy law to protect consumers across the state of Florida. I am proud to sponsor House Bill 969. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also just like to make a comment about schools. Florida schools are open for in-person instruction. Every single parent in this state has a right to send their kid to in-person instruction. We have done it the right way. We are not going to turn back. What the CDC put out, 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, I wonder why they would do it then, was quite frankly a disgrace. It would require, if you actually followed that, closing 90% of schools in the United States. We have been open, they will remain open, and we are not turning back. We've been open the whole time since August. We had kids doing camps and athletics and all that over the summer. And we've been in person as much as anybody in the country, and yet we're 34th out of 50 states in DC for COVID-19 cases on a per capita basis for children. 33 states have more cases per capita than Florida for children per capita, and many of those don't have a lot of in-person instruction in school. And so there is no evidence to suggest that school kids should do anything else other than be in school. This has been clear for months and months and months. We followed the data when we worked to get the parents the option to send the kids back, because we had looked at what happened in Europe, places like Sweden and all these other places. And it does not require another $100 billion. The school reopening plan that makes the most sense, if you want to open schools, open them. Open the door. Let them come in and let them learn. And the only reason that that is not happening across this country, like it is in Florida, like it is in a handful of other states, it's one reason and one reason only. Because the Democratic Party puts the interests of education unions and special interests ahead of the well-being of our children and of our families. These kids have been out of school in parts of this country for almost a year. And if you follow that CDC guidance, they will not go back in this school year, and they may not even go back in the fall. That is a disgrace. That is not science. That is putting politics ahead of what's right for kids. That is putting politics and special interests ahead of what the evidence and observed experience says. So we're better off as a result of giving parents and kids that opportunity. I can tell you, I cannot go out without a parent coming up to me saying how much better it is that their child's able to go to school. And so we're not looking back. We're going to continue going forward. And I know the speaker agrees with me. You want to opine on that for a second?
I'll echo those comments. You know, I am a father of 2 little boys, and we're blessed to have the opportunity to have them back into school in Pinellas County. And I can tell you that I speak to parents every day, whether it's at the car line or the baseball field, who are grateful for the fact that their kids have the opportunity to go back to school. I get that every family is not going to feel comfortable doing that, but every family is happy that they have the option to send their kids back. And the vast majority of families, certainly where I'm from, are sending their kids back to school. But here's the big takeaway here. because there was a lot of writing about this at the time, if you all recall when this happened, and that is the governor, Commissioner Corcoran, the members of the legislature, said, listen, we want to get the schools open as soon as possible. We want to get the kids back in the classroom as soon as possible. And parents responded in a really, really big way. It's inhumane not to allow children to go back into the classroom to get an education. The focus that we have now in the Florida House, as many of you may have seen the letter that I sent out to the district superintendents last week, is finding the kids who are not reconnected back into the classroom, the folks who are not learning in the classroom, the kids who are not learning on a virtual platform with the K-12 system, figuring out where they are and how do we re-engage them to make sure that they're in the classroom or they're on a virtual space, because every day that goes by that those children are not learning, they're falling behind. And every day that they fall behind, we fall behind. And that's why it's been such a big priority for this governor and for the members of the legislature to get the kids back in the classroom.
All right, questions? Yes, sir.
We heard Jared Moskowitz is going to be resigning from DEM. Any thoughts on why he's making that decision? Any concerns looking forward, looking for somebody new to take over the House?
Well, no, Jared and I discussed it. He's worked incredibly hard. He's done a fantastic job. I think Florida has the best emergency response in the country. I think we've done the best in terms of logistics, both in terms of preparing for responding to storms as well as responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I think Jared was a big reason why. I just think the fact it's been 2 years, he's worked extremely hard, and his family's almost a world away in some respects. When you're in Florida, I mean, many of you know, Tallahassee down to Broward, it's not like you can just hop on a plane all the time and get down there. It's a long drive and it weighs. So he's done well by us. I told him, I said, they should really make you FEMA director, and maybe they will do that someday. I'd also, since we're asked, we think that the deputy, Kevin Guthrie, has done a great job. So Kevin is going to take Jared's spot when Jared is ready to move on. And I have a lot of confidence in Kevin. He's been fantastic. He's been in the emergency management space for a long time. And when we do some of this stuff, I mean, I'll go and kind of we'll do an event. Oh, we have now vaccines in this part of the state. There's a lot that goes into that, and these guys are getting it done very, very quickly. It's very impressive, and Jared and Kevin have really led the way. So we thank Jared for his service, and we think Kevin will be able to pick up very nicely.
Governor, last week in the Senate, we heard from nursing home residents who had some concerns about the liability protection bill that's moving through over there. They say it's letting some of the bad actors off easy. I know that you supported the idea overall, but I don't know if that's changed.
So here's what if somebody is a bad actor generally, I don't think the COVID should have any change in general liability. You obviously have duty to care. You have certain duties under the law that should be respected. I just think if we say, what I don't want is, okay, this nursing home has allowed the residents to live more normal lives. They're all vaccinated or been offered vaccines, let's say. At that point, I think that is a reasonable decision to do. I don't think that should subject them to liability. But that doesn't mean you can't do other things, and I don't want to sweep in other stuff. I just want on the COVID, these residents, the nursing homes and their residents, to feel comfortable that they can get back to normal. You look, and I think it's going to take a couple more weeks for the U.S., but you look what's happening in Israel, the decline in the hospitalizations for people who are elderly, which they went through and did that. You are seeing a decline nationwide here in nursing home cases. I think we're really turning the corner thanks to these vaccines. And my hope is yes, COVID's important. Obviously, these are the folks who are the most vulnerable to COVID, but they have also had other tolls on them for all the mitigation. And it's been very difficult when we work to get the visitation in. A lot of these families were so happy. It was like such a weight lifted off their shoulder because they hadn't. You can go, you can talk on online, you can do one of these FaceTime, you can even go in the window and have a visit, which people were doing. But if you can't go up and give someone you love a hug, it's just not the same. And so they really, really love that. But I have folks tell me that not all of them are able to do all they want with their family members because of this fear of liability. So let's just do it to where we want to have these places open. We have the tools in place between vaccines and all these other stuff, but they need to be able to live their best lives. And I don't want to see any more despair and loneliness in these facilities. I do think that if they're scared of getting sued, I think they're going to err on the side of constricting the residents more than is necessary to be done.
How constitutionally feasible is it for one state to enforce regulations on companies that operate nationwide?
Well, they operate in the state of Florida. I mean, what's the difference in terms of how like a rental car would be treated in California versus here? There's obviously consumer protections take different forms in different states, and that's been true with a bunch of different aspects of the economy. So I think here, this makes a lot of sense. You're going to have to give Floridians the right to opt out. Floridians need to have some control over their data. And I'll tell you, I obviously knew that this data was used, but when you really start to get into it, it is unbelievable the amount of information without even you using your phone, just sitting there, the amount of information that they're constantly pulling. And it's like, okay, 10 years ago, if I'd have bought a TV, I would have taken it, I would have set it up, I would have paid the money for it, and I would have watched what I wanted, and that was it. I wouldn't have to deal with this company anymore. Now, even the TVs are, quote, smart TVs. They're collecting data. But the phones and all these other things, it's like, all I want to do is be able to make the phone calls. I don't want it to be constantly sending information to all these companies. But if they're going to do that, what benefit of the bargain are the consumers getting? They're not really getting much for this. They're paying good money for the product, and then they're constantly, through the ability of these companies to take the data, constantly getting this monetized without really anything for the consumer in it. So I think we need to look at it a little bit differently, and that's what we're going to be doing going forward.
How do you balance the aggressive posture that you're taking with your ability to attract these big tech companies to Florida, which is something that your business development folks want to bring in?
Well, I mean, first of all, we're doing very well in Florida, and we have a lot of great things going on in aerospace. We have a lot of great things in finance. We're going to be working really hard on manufacturing. So, I think a lot of them in what they're doing, quite frankly, how great a fit that is in Florida. Look, we believe in free speech, okay? We believe in treating people with respect. We don't believe in enforcing certain orthodoxies. And so people that come to Florida, there's folks that can contribute. There's folks that if they come, it doesn't mean you're not going to be held accountable. You will absolutely be held accountable.
Censorship bill, could that be applied, or have you talked to the former president about how he, as a Florida resident, may be able to utilize that legislation if it passes?
No, I haven't.
Governor, in regards to this proposal and some of the things that are being discussed, what about whether or not you would apply these same principles to state and local government? Because in fact, the state of Florida has come under fire over the last few years for selling driver's license data, including in some instances it being done outside the scope of the law. You had a massive data breach with Healthy Kids recently. You had data breach with Bright Futures. I'm just kind of curious if you have this strong feelings about data privacy and the rights of Floridians, whether it should extend to when it happens when government is selling them data.
You want to take that?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Governor.
Yep. Sure.
Gary, I think it's one thing it's important to know, particularly in the highway safety issue, is that, as you know, as every member of the press corps knows, Florida has a robust public records law. So when people requested information from the Department of Highway Safety, which they were allowed to give under federal law and required to give under Florida law, as you all know, and I'm sure it's been a source of frustration for each one of you, there has to be a fee associated with getting that public record so that the individuals who are doing it can copy it, can get it to members of the press. That is where the money came from the Department of Motor Vehicles. So comparing a government entity that is required under the laws that we all celebrate under public records for giving over information to journalistic organizations is very different than a corporate entity that might not be asking permission to take your private information, is probably not asking information to exploit that information and to sell it to third parties or foreign nations. I think we can all agree those are pretty different things.
I think has to do with the fact that some of these, that there have been instances where Floridians have complained to you
One more.
about that information and the way it was used.
Anybody else?
Under the COVID liability protection healthcare bill, abortion clinics are listed as healthcare providers under the statute that it lists. Should they be included in this bill?
Chris, you want to take? I have not seen the bills. I have not been able to do it. I have talked with some of the legislators about some general outlines.
I'm sorry, can you say the question again?
The COVID liability bill proposed by Senator Brandis, abortion clinics are included in the statute that's covered under the bill. Should they be included under this bill?
You have to ask Senator Brandis about his bill. Happy to answer questions about the House bill.
Thanks.
All right.